How far would you go to save someone you once loved, but who also deeply hurt you? This isn't just a philosophical question. It's the kind of dilemma that pulls the rug out from under your feet when it becomes real, when the clock is ticking and every passing second could be your last. Imagine facing a situation where all your power, all your influence, and all the money you've built up over a lifetime simply evaporate. It doesn't matter how many doors you've opened with a phone call, how many favors important people owe you, or how many zeros are in your bank account. None of that means absolutely anything when you hear a no that sounds like a death sentence. The story you are about to hear takes place in the cold corridors of a hospital, where medical rules and bureaucratic protocols clash head-on with human despair. It's about a man who always had everything under control, who never accepted limits, who built an empire from scratch and became accustomed to turning obstacles into opportunities. But there is something that not even the most powerful of men can buy: time. And when that time is running out for someone who carries a history full of unresolved love, guilt that was never confronted, and words that were never spoken, the line between right and wrong begins to disappear. Have you ever wondered what you would do if you had to choose between following the rules that society has established and doing what your heart tells you is necessary? Stay with me until the end, because this story will put you exactly at that moral crossroads. We're talking about decisions that destroy reputations, that can cost years of freedom, that have the power to transform a respected man into a criminal in the eyes of the law. But we're also talking about redemption, that unique chance to correct past mistakes that haunt us every night when we try to sleep. The protagonist of this story is not a perfect hero. In fact, he made serious mistakes, deeply hurt those he loved most, and paid the price with a loneliness that all the money in the world cannot fill. For years, he convinced himself that he had made the right choices, prioritizing his career, his business, his financial success. But there comes a moment in life when the universe holds up a brutal mirror and forces you to confront who you have truly become. For him, that moment arrived on a rainy Tuesday at 11:47 p.m. when a doctor uttered the words that would change everything. What you are about to discover may surprise you, because it is not a story with easy answers or predictable endings. It's about that gray area where morality mixes with despair, where love confronts pride, where power finds its most painful limits. It's about a man who had to decide, in a matter of hours, whether he was willing to risk absolutely everything his reputation built over decades, his freedom, his future for someone who had left him 3 years earlier, after an emotional betrayal that shattered a 15-year marriage into irreparable pieces, now with this woman's life hanging by a thread and the medical system saying nothing can be done. He must make the most important decision of his life. And that decision goes beyond saving a life. And this decision goes beyond saving a life. It's about confronting ghosts he buried deep, looking into the eyes of the guilt that has haunted him since the separation, and admitting that perhaps all the professional achievements in the world are worthless when you lose what truly matters. It's about discovering, in the most painful way possible, that there is a kind of power that cannot be bought, negotiated, or won through influence. The power to go back in time and do things differently. And look, if you've ever been through something similar in your life, if you've ever had to make an impossible decision where there were no right answers, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. It could be a word, a phrase, or even your own story. Because these experiences that transform us, that shake us to our core and force us to rethink everything we believed about ourselves, need to be shared. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who are also struggling with their own moral dilemmas, their own guilt, their own chances of redemption. If this kind of content resonates with you, if you want to continue exploring these stories about choices that define who we truly are, about love, sacrifice, and the limits of human morality, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because we're going to delve even deeper into this journey, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Oh, and leave a like if the story is captivating you so far it shows me we're on the right track, bringing you narratives that truly matter. Now, returning to our protagonist in that hospital corridor, his hands trembling and the weight of the world on his shoulders, he knew he only had a few hours to act. The medical team had been clear. Without the experimental transplant, Helena wouldn't live more than 3 days. And the hospital committee had been even clearer. There would be no exceptions, no queue jumping, no mercy for those who didn't fit the established protocols. But Marcello wasn't a man to accept no as a final answer. No for a final answer. And it was precisely at that moment, at 11:47 p.m. on that rainy Tuesday, that everything crumbled. The hallway of Snow Lucas Hospital was freezing, with that characteristic smell of disinfectant mixed with reheated coffee from the vending machine. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, creating shadows that danced on the white walls. Marcello was there, standing, wearing a $3,000 Armani suit that suddenly seemed like a useless rag. Because none of that mattered. Nothing. Dr. Enrique Matos, head of the transplant team, held a clipboard against his chest as if it were a protective shield. His eyes avoided direct contact, the kind of look doctors develop when they have to repeatedly deliver bad news. The transformation in Marcello's face was visible when the words came out of the doctor's mouth. I deeply regret to say this, Mr. Silva, but the Medical Ethics Committee has denied authorization for the experimental procedure. Ms. Helena Cardoso does not meet the criteria established by the protocol. I understand that this is difficult to hear, but there are rules that we need to follow. Rules, protocols, criteria, words that felt like bullets piercing Marcello's chest. He had built a billion-dollar empire precisely by knowing when to break rules, when to circumvent protocols, when to rewrite criteria in his favor. But there, in that hallway, facing the medical verdict, all his experience in complex negotiations, all the political connections he had cultivated for decades, all the power he had accumulated simply evaporated. The impact of that revelation was brutal. For the first time in his adult life, Marcello Augusto Silva was completely powerless. And just 15 meters away, on the other side of that frosted glass door, Helena was dying. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because Helena wasn't just another patient fighting for survival in that hospital bed. She was the woman Marcello swore to protect during 15 years of marriage, the mother of their daughter, the person who knew his deepest fears and his most secret dreams, and she was also the woman whose heart he broke with his own hands through selfish choices that prioritized million-dollar contracts over birthdays, business trips over graduations, executive meetings over promises whispered in the dark. The hidden truth behind that dramatic scene at the hospital was that Marcello carried 3 years of unprocessed guilt. 3 years since that fateful night when Helena finally had the courage to say enough, to pack her bags and walk out the door. Without looking back, he could still hear her last words echoing in his mind like a curse. You only think about yourself, Marcello. One day you'll realize that money can't buy what really matters. But when that day comes, it will be too late. Marcello's mindset was always geared towards business victories, expanding his territory in the business world, accumulating power and influence. He convinced himself that he was building a legacy, securing his family's financial future. But this journey of professional success came at the highest possible price. He lost the person he loved most. And during those 3 years of separation, he nurtured his wounded pride, telling himself that he had made the right choices, that Helena was the one who didn't understand the demands of an ambitious man. But now, seeing her there, pale and frail, connected to machines that kept her body artificially functioning, all those justifications vanished. The transformation happened instantly, from a successful businessman to a man destroyed by a guilty conscience. And it was in this moment of painful revelation that Marcello made the decision to do what he always did when faced with obstacles, use his power to change the game. In the next 48 hours, he activated every important contact he had cultivated throughout his meteoric career. He called the senator who owed him political favors, the judge who played golf with him every Saturday, international medical consultants willing to issue technical opinions in exchange for generous consulting fees. He offered enough money to build an entire new wing in the hospital, promised million-dollar donations, and hinted at strategic investments. But the answer was always the same: no, no, no. Each phone call ended with polite variations of the same refusal. The inner workings of the healthcare system revealed a brutal truth that Marcello had never faced. There are lines that not even billions of reais can cross. Dr. Matos was direct during a tense meeting in the boardroom. "Mr. Silva, there are 47 people in line waiting for this type of procedure. People who have been waiting for months. If I put your ex-wife ahead of the line without a solid medical justification, I will be signing another person's death warrant. Can you live with that?" Marcello's mindset collapsed. For the first time, his entire arsenal of negotiation, persuasion, and influence strategies simply wasn't working. And while he banged his head against these invisible walls, the clock kept ticking relentlessly. 72 hours turned into 48. 48 turned into 24. The monitors beside Helena's bed showed increasingly weak vital signs, organs progressively failing. Marcello's desperate journey through the corridors of power revealed the devastating impact of a simple truth: money buys many things, but it doesn't buy time. It was at 3 in the morning on a Thursday that the definitive transformation took place within Marcello. Alone in the five-star hotel room that made no difference at that moment, he held an old photo of their wedding in his hands. Helena smiled with that sparkle in her eyes that he hadn't seen in years. And it was there, in that heavy silence of the early morning, that a truth crystallized in his mind. All the rules he had tried to follow in the last 48 hours wouldn't save Helena. The system wasn't going to move. The protocols weren't going to be flexible. And she would die as long as he continued to be the obedient businessman who accepts no for an answer. So Marcello made the most dangerous and liberating decision of his life. He was going to act outside the law. He was going to illegally transfer Helena to a private clinic abroad, perform the experimental procedure without any official approval, and hire a medical team willing to risk their professional licenses. The impact of this choice was crystal clear. If discovered, he would face criminal charges of aggravated kidnapping, could get up to 15 years in prison, and would lose everything he had built in 3 decades of relentless work. His reputation would be destroyed, his companies would collapse, and his name would become synonymous with criminal in the newspapers. But the most profound revelation came when he realized he didn't care. For the first time in his life, Marcello was willing to trade everything: career, fortune, freedom, future, for a chance to do the right thing, not as a calculating businessman, as a human being. His journey had reached a crossroads where the old mindset needed to die so that something new could be born. And the question echoing in his head was the same one I'm asking you now. Would you risk everything for someone who deeply hurt you in the past? The plan was executed in the early hours of Friday morning. Marcello contacted a trusted doctor willing to risk everything, hired a private team that would turn a blind eye to legal aspects, and prepared a private ambulance with falsified documentation at 4:37 a.m. While the hospital was operating with a reduced night shift staff, Helena was illegally transferred. The journey to the private clinic was tense. Each red light seemed like an eternity. Each distant siren sounded like the police were coming after them. The experimental procedure lasted 11 hours. 11 hours in which Marcello walked the corridors of that clinic like a ghost, unable to eat, drink, or think about anything other than what was happening inside that operating room. And when the doctor finally came out, with that neutral expression that healthcare professionals develop to avoid revealing the results prematurely, the silence seemed to last for ages. Helena survived. Against all medical odds, the procedure worked. But the hidden truth about extreme decisions is that every victory carries its price. 3 days later, the authorities knocked on the clinic's door. The illegal transfer had been discovered. Investigations were opened. Criminal proceedings initiated. Within weeks, Marcelo's business empire began to crumble. Shareholders demanded his removal, business partners canceled contracts, and the media turned his story into a national scandal. But here is the most profound impact of this transformation. When Helena finally awoke, still weak but alive, and her eyes met Marcelo's sitting beside her bed, something changed forever. He had lost everything he had built in 3 decades, but for the first time, he felt truly free. 6 months later, Marcello was serving his sentence under a semi-open regime. He had lost his fortune in legal settlements and attorney fees. His reputation was in tatters in business circles, and his name appeared in the news as an example of how far desperation can take someone. But every Wednesday and Saturday, he visited Helena during her recovery. They talked about their daughter, about regrets, about second chances that life sometimes offers in unexpected ways. She testified in his favor at the trial, which considerably reduced his sentence. They never got back together. Some wounds leave scars too permanent for that. But something greater was born from that insane night when Marcello crossed all the lines. Genuine forgiveness, redemption achieved through sacrifice, and the profound understanding that true power lies not in controlling everything around you, but in knowing when to risk everything for what truly matters. And look, if this story moved you in any way, if it made you reflect on your own choices, on what you would be willing to risk for love or redemption, leave a comment here. I would risk everything too. I want to know what you would have done in Marcelo's place, because these conversations are what make this space special. And if you enjoyed this type of content, if you want to continue exploring stories about impossible moral dilemmas, about love that defies rules, about sacrifice that transforms lives, subscribe to the channel. Your presence here makes all the difference. Leave a like if the story captivated you until the end. That's how I know we're on the right track. And there's a video here that delves even deeper into this universe of decisions that define us. Click and continue with me there.